And we're recording again. Okay. Alright, Skip Baker is my guest today. We're talking about Christian identity. We're talking skipbaker.com is his website. If you go there, you can see some great artwork. And matter of fact, if you go to freeamerican.com, you can save the show, you can bring it down, and you can see we real Israelites founded many nations. Where we went to Iceland, we went to Germany, we went to Norway, we went to Denmark, we went to Germany. And Edomite Jews stole just one, and Jews aren't even from Israel. The Edomite Jews are the Canaanites, the heathen that God wanted dead when they hadn't changed, and they hadn't changed a bit in 3,000 years. God says of Jews in Obadiah 1-2, Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. Does that sound like God's chosen people to you? That's just one of the little flyers. Skip's thing here, so.
Yeah, it's amazing when you realize that God called them greatly despised in His eyes, and yet now they're claiming to be His chosen people. It really is incredible when you think about it, and that's why I tried to map everything out on the webpage to show the migration of the true Israelites up through the Caucasus Mountains into southern Russia and then westward into Europe, and finally ultimately replanted in America the New Jerusalem that has USA right in the middle of the word Jerusalem. So that's where we came from.
Is that what they're afraid of, that we'll actually just take back this country? I mean, our founding fathers fought the New World Order of their day. The sun never sets on the English Empire. The English Empire was funded by the Rothschilds, by the banksters.
Yeah, but in a way, that was a fulfillment of prophecy, too, because we spread out everywhere, and we had colonies everywhere, and it was true, the sun never set on the Union Jack, but the Union Jack even has symbology way back to Jacob, because the Jack in Union Jack is talking about Jacob. And all of the flags of Europe and all the heraldry of Europe, all of that points back to the symbols that the children of Israel carried when we left Egypt. Each tribe had those symbols on a flag that hung vertically over their area. And that's where all that European heraldry comes from. It comes from the heraldry that we had when we were the 12 tribes of Israel. And of course the Jews have no heraldry. The only thing they have is the 6-pointed 666 star that has 6 points, 6 triangles, 6 corners that equals 666 in many ways. And of course is the mark of the 8th beast, which is Rothschild. So it's very sad that the Baptists don't understand that the very people they are supporting are the Antichrist. And the whole book of John shows you that they are the Antichrist. I mean, when Jesus said, "Ye are of your father the devil," what do they think he meant by that? It just seems to go right past them, and they don't realize that the Antichrist is described in the book of John, and if they would just read that instead of watching Jew TV, they would realize that the Jews are the Antichrist.
Well, they don't. It's like I try to tell people, Skip. They don't call it programming for nothing. That is exactly what it's.
Right.
That is exactly what they're doing to the American people. And one other thing, and you can tell me how this relates in the Bible. You know, but it's kind of like the festival of Purim. You know, they are poisoning us, and they're killing us, and they're drugging us. Americans are the most drugged country in the world. Every other commercial on the Super Bowl is for some kind of pharmaceutical.
Right, yeah. And in fact, that's what the word sorcery originally means in Revelation, where it says, by thy sorcery you have deceived the whole world. The word sorcery is pharmakia in Greek. So Revelation is telling us that they're going to use all this pharmakia against us here at the end. And of course, even the stuff they put in your water, the fluoride, is poisoning your mind. It's very dangerous stuff. So I'm glad we've got 2 artesian wells here on the farm, and we won't be drinking any of that fluoride. But I don't know how people can avoid that in the cities, the big cities, because it's everywhere you look. And it's just amazing the way they pulled this together here at the end times, and how it is a fulfillment of the prophecies. And now the prophecies of Ezekiel 37 and 38 are about to be fulfilled, because Gog and Magog are going to get the Chinese and the Russians and everybody they can against us. And of course, God says he's going to bring fire down from heaven and destroy these people when they attack his country, the New Jerusalem, America. So we really should not be worried, because we're going to have protection from the Almighty when this thing really starts to break loose. And I think that will probably happen near the end of this year. It's getting extremely close to the time they're going to instigate the entire World War III upon us and try to destroy us finally and completely.
Now, there is a war with some of the recent legislation that have come down, basically suspends posse comitatus, so they could use our own troops against Americans. And we've already got to paid Halliburton, one of the big players in this whole war game. We paid him to build the concentration camps, and now the FBI keeps coming out with funded by Southern Poverty Law and fueled by Southern Poverty Law. They keep trying to say, oh, American sovereign Americans are the problem now. I mean, this is all the propaganda. I mean, basically what I've designed the show to be is a counterintelligence. I mean, we've got to counter this kind of propaganda, folks, or they're going to have us all fighting each other, you know?
Oh yeah, but it's just going to... What a great time to be alive, because we are seeing the final events of world history coming together right now. And it's just going to be an amazing conflagration, but it's also going to be amazing saving power that Yahweh is going to come down and really straighten this mess out right when things look really bad. And they are really adding up to look awful bad when you mention all these things, because it looks like all was lost. But
well, the whole war, Third World War with the Muslims, has been predicted since the Civil War. The Masons, and let's talk about the Masons for a minute. I mean, I've also had people point their finger at about this whole New World Order thing. Everything you've said about the Jews is accurate, but what about the Jesuits? What about the Black Pope? What about the Masons? I mean, Albert Pike was a Mason, and he predicted the whole New World Order. The Bar Association, all your lawyers out there, in violation of the original 13th Amendment. What are we facing? I mean, I almost refuse to believe that every Jew out there is Satan's child working for the New World Order. I don't buy into that. And I think the problem that we've got, that Jesus countered, Skip, is how do you fight evil without becoming evil? You tell the truth. You tell the truth, and you try to show people that what tyranny is. But
you got to remember that when the Jesuits, you see, are all crypto Jews pretending to be Catholics. And when that started, that was when Queen Isabella told the Jews in Spain to convert or leave the country. Well, the rabbis wrote back and said, well, just convert and infiltrate the church. And of course, that's when burning at the stake started. So They have infiltrated the Catholic Church. They have infiltrated the Masons. They have infiltrated the Eastern Star. And their propaganda makes all this work together for them. So infiltration it's just like what JFK said. We're fighting this terrible beast that relies on infiltration instead of armies by day. And of course, that paragraph is what really got him killed, because he did everything but say the Jews are behind this infiltration. But they knew who he was talking about, and they set out to kill him from that moment in June, when he began to take the Federal Reserve away from him. But it's just this constant infiltration that they've been up to. That's why it's important to listen to some of the sermons of Dr. Wesley Swift, because he goes into this business about children of the devil can't act in any other way. It's in their DNA, it's in their genes. They can pretend to become Christians, but it can't be done. A Jew cannot be saved. You can't save a demon. It's just out of the picture, and that's why I enjoy listening to these sermons on KingIdentity.com. I get up early and download a few, because we have free downloading tonight, and it's just amazing when you see these scriptures come alive that the pastors aren't teaching today in the churches, because they're Judeo-Christian churches instead of Christian churches. And
you know, it's strange, Skip. I mean, I was baptized. My grandfather was a Methodist preacher. My father, I believe, was too, for a short time period. But I have never particularly felt good in churches. I don't go to churches. I don't go to me. Yeah. When I walk outside, I'm in my church. That's a church God made for me.
Right. Well, that's very true, because every church you darken the door of is basically working for the Jews, because they believe that Jesus was a Jew. But once you look at the map and you realize that he's from Galilee, and they were 4 countries away in Idumea, actually 5 countries when you consider Edom. But once you look at a map and understand where the Jews came from and where the Israelites came from, you realize that Jesus was an Israelite from the tribe of Judah, and he was not a Jew. And that's this is the biggest lie that I think is told. First of all, you know, all of your paintings and all of your drawing from all your masters of Jesus is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man. That's the way Pontius Pilate described him in a letter to Caesar as a very handsome. And ever since, the Jews have been trying to portray him as some kind of little hook-nosed Neanderthal. Right, and you got to remember that Billy Graham was a crypto-Jew whose real name was Frank, as in Anne Frank, and his job was to infiltrate Christianity and begin to teach universalism, because they knew that that would destroy Christianity if the Christians didn't remember who they were and they lost their contact. For instance, the Sixth Commandment really used to say, "Thou shalt not adulterate," and the word adulterate meant mixed race with the Canaanites that were around the Israelites. That was the biggest sin to God, was to have offspring of these fallen angels, because he said that person cannot come into the congregation of Yahweh unto the 10th generation.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better about all the extramarital affairs that I had.
So they weren't to come into the congregation at all, because they were of that fallen seed. And when you mix the holy seed with the fallen seed, there's no way that God can save that offspring. That's just a lost cause, because it's based on race plus grace. And it's the world of the Israelites that Jesus came to save. And he didn't come to save China or Africa or these other places. He came for his kinsmen. And that's very clear in the New Testament and the Old Testament, that this redemption redemption was going to be for Israel only. And yet, because of the bad translations of the KJV, that's not clear at all. You really have to work to understand what the original Greek and Hebrew says, and it's kind of a lifelong process to get into that, and that's why I enjoy those sermons that they have there at King Identity. They're just tremendous ministers like Comparet and Wesley Swift and others that spent their lives studying the scriptures and really understanding the history of how we left Israel so long ago. And for instance, the Danube River is named after the tribe of Dan. And Denmark, those people were the tribe of Dan. So there are all these clues all over Europe that we didn't know about. In fact, the Icelanders are from the tribe of Benjamin. And it's just amazing how we've had our history stolen from us, and our identity has been stolen in the greatest case of identity theft in the history of the world. It's just incredible what has been done.
Now, Manny on the chat room is asking, who are the Illuminati?
Well, the Illuminati are the Jews that got together there in Bavaria, a couple hundred years ago. In fact, the guy that was carrying the document that explained what they were going to do was struck by lightning, of all things, and that's how the Bavarian government got a hold of the plan. I guess this was the plan long before the Elders of Zion. It was the whole plan about how they wanted to take over the earth by basically infiltrating the Freemasons and everything else, and starting this, what would almost look like a new religion, but it would really be them behind it. And of course, the Bavarians tried to warn the French and everybody else, but nobody would pay attention to them. So the thing really took hold and grew just like the Freemasons. And of course, at the beginning of the American Revolution, the Masons had not yet been infiltrated, and they used that to some extent to foment the revolution and get organized against the British. But it was much later that it became infiltrated, and of course Washington really said he'd never been in a Masonic lodge for 30 years, and he presided over none of them, and yet they make him out to be this great big Mason today, and all these paintings as if he was one of the head Masons at the time, but that wasn't the case at all. So we've got all this misinformation everywhere.
Yeah, Texas. I know lawyers that have become Masons because they were patriotic. They wanted the connections, and they wanted to be able to do something.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people felt that way and thought that they could change the organization by joining it and doing what they could. But it's kind of a lost cause when you realize how well they control it from the inside. And of course, to go up the degrees, you have to reject Jesus Christ entirely. In order to get up to the 33rd degree, you have to totally and completely reject Christ to make it that far. So it becomes pretty clear that it's a rejection of the true religion.
Well, I've got Morals and Dogma sitting right here over my shoulder, and Albert Pike tells you that Lucifer is a god of this world. He's the one they follow.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's amazing. And yet, you try to talk to somebody that's a Mason or in the Eastern Star and tell them they should get out of that, they become highly offended, because to them it's a wonderful organization. They have all these great dinners and all these affairs that they've gone to.
And the Catholic Church, I mean, it feeds a lot of people and consoles a lot of people, and with all that gold they stole from the Incas,
Right, yeah. So it's really amazing how you can almost not disabuse somebody of their false viewpoint, because they want to protect it so well. And in fact, I know a Danish guy here, and I tried to explain to him that the Danes are the tribe of Dan, and that the Danube was named after the tribe of Dan, and yet he didn't want to know it. It's so funny to see, to tell somebody such good news that you are one of the chosen people, and yet they don't want to hear it. It's hard to understand that.
What? You're a racist. You're a racist, aren't you? You're anti-Semitic. You don't like Jews. Why don't you like Jews? Why don't you like Jews?
Exactly. So you can get almost nowhere. And I never could understand that until I read an article by a CI pastor in which he explained that if they're not called by the Father, they're not going to get it. It's going to go right over their heads. It doesn't matter how well you explain it, or how many pictures you show them, or how many maps you show them. If they're not called by the Father, they ain't going to get it. And I finally realized at that point that, well, no wonder, I mean, you try to think of the best way to explain this history, and yet they don't get it, and you're thinking, well, am I not saying this right, or is this picture not right? But that's not the point. There are people that just aren't called for this final battle. However, I think there's going to be another huge group that will wake up at the last minute because of the prophecy of the dry bones, how this giant valley filled with all these dry bones, these dead bones, suddenly came back to life and just formed a huge army right at the end. And I think that's associated also with chapter 37 and 38 of Ezekiel, where we are looking at the final assault on the United States of America, and how many, many people will wake up at the last minute and finally join that great army of Yahweh that is just numberless. So, because
Skip, I mean, this is what really frustrates me. The Illuminati, their whole plan is divide and conquer. They want the blacks. They want the blacks fighting the whites. They want the whites fighting the blacks. They want us fighting the Muslims. They want the Christians fighting the Muslims.
Yeah, they want to destroy everything, because it's like that one Jew said: "We Jews are destroyers, and we always will be so." And that was very true, because. And I'm sure he didn't understand why, himself.
And the Pharisees were working with the Romans to throw the Christians to the lions, weren't they?
Oh yeah.
They were using the Romans, the Pharisees, the Jews, whatever you want. I mean, the word Jew. We probably really ought to call them Edomites.
Yeah,
because the word Jew didn't even exist. The J word didn't exist back then, did it?
Well, in fact, it didn't exist even in the early 18th century, because I have a photo of a grave in Colonial Williamsburg where James is spelled with an I instead of a J in 1705. So the J wasn't even invented in English until much, much later than 1705, I think around the mid-1700s. Before they put that little curly Q on the bottom of an I and turned it into a J. So before that, the Jews were known as Yiddish in Khazarian, and the Yiddish joined the Jewish religion in 740 AD, and then began to race mix with these Edomites, so that that fallen angel blood was completely spread throughout their civilization the next 1,000 years. And that is why we had the Rothschilds finally in 1800 taking over the whole banking system of Europe and finally America. So it's really been a fast 2 days, as God would call 2,000 years.
I'm really kind of intrigued that you agree with my estimation that we've been in Armageddon for the last 100 years, and we're just approaching the climax of it now.
Oh yeah, it's about to come to a head this year, I believe. In fact, the Mayan calendar was given to the Mayans by bearded white men who came on ships on the water, and they gave them that calendar, and those bearded white men were Israelites, and that calendar really belongs to Enoch. It was Adam, Seth, and Enoch that built the Great Pyramid in Egypt, and they probably had access to levitation when they did it, and powerful machinery to dress the stones, because there is no way those 80-ton stones could have been piled up so perfectly without levitation. I don't understand how it could be done otherwise.
Well, according to some of the news that I've just published, a scientist in Iran says he's invented a ship, basically a UFO type of ship, that is capable of doing that, levitating or anti-gravity, creating fields of anti-gravity and powered by magnetics.
Amazing.
Now, I think, personally, in my articles, I think we had that technology thousands of years ago, and what you were talking about here is just the most recent history since the flood.
Oh, yeah. In fact, they drilled an oil well in Montana somewhere that was extremely deep, and they pulled up a brass gear that was tens of thousands, millions of years old. I mean, it was an ancient thing that somebody had made and created. I forget what the time period was, but Dr. Swift tells about it in one of his sermons, about how they pulled up this gear out of this oil well. And
well, that's why, Skip, I've decided for my next 3 or 4 books are going to be science fiction. Because I think that any conspiracy theory, any theory of evolution or the universe that you can come up with it's probable that it's already occurred, it's already happened somewhere across this vast universe.
Well, it's just amazing the things that we don't know that happened before us, and I'm looking forward to that show that you're going to have with Jonathan about the Ron Wyatt.
That's right. We're going to talk about the Ark of the Covenant and where it is, and my guest that's coming up went over there to disprove it, to prove that Ron Wyatt was a liar or a con artist, and he came back a convinced man. So that'll be my guest up in a day or so here.
Yeah, that's going to be a great show. I can't wait to see that, to hear that, because I think he even went to Ron's house in Nashville and met with him for 2 weeks, and by the time he came away from that, he was just astounded. And when I first saw that, Eli called me the day he saw that video, and I went and watched it, and I was just astounded by his story. And I think it was true, because when you realize what Daniel 9 is talking about,
Voices on the web can take
okay,
you.
hang on a second.
Has been completed.
Truth Radio wants to take you
Hold
to
on.
the center,
Let
center
me,
of understanding.
Take that off.
TruthRadio.com.
hello?
And hold on with me here. It's end of the hour here, so we're cutting off a couple of things here, and cutting off that one, and that one.
Welcome to TalkShoe. Please enter the call ID followed by the pound key.
No,
You may access the call up to 15 minutes before its scheduled start time.
Can you send me the URL that people can download